What you're trying to do is get as much longevity out of these forks and out of this rear shock as you can. And as you can see, it's immediately just taking out all the gunk that's in that chain. So now what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna start pedaling through. You know here with this chain that we don't want it to sit in the 0.5. We know you've been abusing your bike, neglecting it, riding it hard and throwing it in the garage and forgetting about it. Well, we wanted to create a video here that's gonna give you all your pre-ride, post-ride tips to keep you riding and rolling pristine. The importance about riding your bike is making sure it keeps riding. We want to be able to get out there and ride our bikes every single time and have it perform exactly how we desire and what we expect it to do. We're spending a lot of money on our bikes, right? They bring a lot of fun, they get out there, and we put a lot of beating on them. So we want to get into here and show you different ways before you get out and ride and after you get out on a long ride, a hard ride, or even a short ride, and just keep your bike rolling smoothly. Maybe this is your first time buying a mountain bike or whatever bike it may be, and you're kind of curious, how do I keep this bike and this investment I just made rolling for as long as possible and giving me the exact outcome that I want every time? So we're gonna go over some points here. We're gonna start with the pre-ride stuff. We're gonna bring through them. I'm gonna show you how we're gonna do it. Here we got Preston's bike right here on the stand. We got Alex over here on his e-bike here, so we can give you a distinction between the two bikes and kind of just break down the different ways pre-ride and then after you've been out there riding, having that great time, just making sure that that bike is ready to go when you throw it in the garage and go sit back on the couch, pop open a Dr. Pepper like Alex loves to do, and enjoy your day. So let's get into these first points. All right. So getting into the pre-ride points, the first point I want to bring into is tire pressure, right? We all want that right feel. We want to make sure we're gripping down the trails and getting everything in. Now tire pressure, I'll just start right now by saying is a very subjective number. As you ride, or maybe you've been riding for a while, I'm sure you've come up with that exact number. Chances are you like it a little bit less pressure in the front wheel, a little bit stiffer of a profile in the back, because that's going to give you your traction versus your control and your grip based on the style of riding you do. What I recommend definitely getting is a really good tire pressure gauge. Wow, we love this Topeak one we have here. It's always on point. It works great. It's small and it works really good. So let's show you what I mean here. What you're gonna wanna do, get that cap off. Now with this bike, we have Cush core installed, so that's gonna affect our PSI a little bit, just something to consider. Go ahead and get this on. I hear an audible beep, I know it's ready to go. Now what I'm gonna wanna do here is just set this on. And get it to give me a reading. There we go. So we have 27 PSI here in the rear, which is about where Preston likes to ride his rear tire, so we know that we're getting exactly what we need. So what we want to do is make sure that we're on that point. Put his cap back on and let me get back here. Ideally, as you ride, as your bike's sitting, you're going to lose a little bit of pressure. So just making sure before you get out and ride that your bike is rolling at the pressure and the control and the grip that you're used to. Or if you're new, try some things out. Figure out where you want to roll and try them out and then adjust accordingly with every ride. So let's get into our second point. All right, so the next point here for your pre-ride check and inspection that we recommend you doing is just checking your brakes. Maybe you're like me and you just like to white knuckle and hit those brakes as much as possible. Well, it's good to just make sure before you get out on that ride that the brake pads have enough padding in there to grip on that rotor, as well as make sure there's some tension on your levers. What I like to do is just kind of get in here and I'm just gonna look in there and I can kind of see, make sure there's that, and then I'm gonna grip and make sure there's tension in that lever, that it's doing what I want. Give it a spin and give it a grip, right? Same thing with the rear. I get back here, I'm looking in there, I love that sound of I-9, by the way. That hub just sounds amazing. I'm seeing a good amount of pad still there, and I'm gripping and making sure I'm getting that exact contact that I want to have. So the second point that we recommend, check those brakes. Make sure they're going to be exactly how you want when you're getting out there. The last thing you want to do is be approaching a big technical terrain aspect and not be able to get that control that you need. The next tip I want to give you is something that maybe not everyone does, but I highly recommend, especially because I have a personal, issue here where I was out on a really fun, great ride, and all of a sudden my bike stopped shifting because I had bent my derailleur. And it was probably because I hadn't really checked my shifting and my drivetrain ability to shift before I went out and ride, because I'm pretty sure it was from the crash the previous ride I was out on. So I ended up getting stuck out and it snapped my chain, whole scenario, right? So now I've made it a very much part of my routine to check through my shifting, run through my bike, and make sure that I'm ready to go. So when I get out there and I'm having a blast, I don't got to cut it short and walk my bike back to the car on the walk of shame. So what we're going to do here is just start kind of pedaling your bike and just pedal through, shift through. And what I'm seeing here is I'm noticing immediately is that my red light's blinking, because Preston here has the wireless SRAM access system. So what that's telling me here is another great pro tip. If you're running wireless, make sure you check your batteries before you take off, right? If you're getting that red light and you know that you're, running low, charge up those batteries. Make sure your extra batteries are in there. Preston keeps a couple right in here in his compartment, just to make sure he's always out there shifting, right? If you're running a mechanical system like we got here, just run through it. Make sure it's shifting smoothly. Go up, go down, and you'll be ready to go. So what we want to do is get our fresh battery ready to go. What we're going to do is we're going to pop this protector off here, unlatch the battery. I'm just going to set that down for now. Take my new battery, set it on. I immediately saw a green light here as I plugged it in. So now we know we're good to go. And then what I'm going to do is clip on my battery guard back on. I'm good to go. I'll go ahead and get in here and start shifting that, and I'm immediately getting a green light. I'm also getting a lot more responsiveness here, ready to go. All right, now the next point, it's kind of a small point, but again, this one's shaped around hearing stories from friends, Preston, the videographer here included, is if you're running clipless pedals, give them a check. Make sure there's no gunk or buildup in there. There's not a rock stuck in there. So if you get out there, the last thing you want to be doing is riding with only one foot clipped in, because you just got something jammed in there or it's malfunctioning. So what I like to do is maybe grab a brush like this one here and then just kind of get in there and check. Make sure there's nothing in any of that clip that's gonna, make it so I can't stay clipped in out on my ride. So this is just a quick tip, but if you're running clipless, just ensure that everything's clipped in. Maybe grab your shoe that you clip in with, clip it in, ensure that it's exactly the tightness that you want, and just be ready to get out there and have some fun. So let's get into our last pre-ride tip here in just a second. All right, now the last pre-ride tip I'm gonna offer here, which is just a general tip. It's not something you probably need to do every ride or before every ride, but it's just something to keep in mind, especially if you're going out for a weekend or you're going on a really long ride, and that's just ensuring that all your bolts and screws are tight where they need to be. Don't just grab any type of wrench and start torquing on them. And we use that word torque, so we recommend getting a nice torque wrench. Maybe like this Park Tools we got right here. Get your setup, know where you're torquing everything to, and just run through some of those bolts, run through those screws, make sure everything's exactly where it needs to be. The last thing you want is to have it be pulling out your, ride tool and be working with stuff out on the trail. You want to get out there and just ride and focus on riding. So these are just a great way to pre-ride, go through your bike, make sure things are ready to go, and have a great time. So that's it for our pre-ride. Let's get into our post-ride stuff that we're going to go over, and make sure that that bike, before you throw it in the garage, is ready for your next trip. Maybe you finished your great ride, great time, you got out with your friends, you had a blast. The first tip I'm gonna recommend on your post-ride, keeping your bike ready to go, is just a general means of inspection. Did you crash on that ride? Did you maybe hear a rock slam up and hit something differently? Usually when I'm on my way back to the truck, you know, I've descended all the way down, whatever it is. As I'm riding back to my truck, I'm shifting through my gears. I'm listening. I'm remembering certain points in which ping interests. So if I heard a rock smack up into a rim really hard, when I get back to my truck, I'm gonna just go over that rim so I can kind of make a mental note here, like, oh, there's a big dent here. I need to make sure I'm gonna continue holding sealant. If I'm running tubeless, I'm making sure my drivetrain's shifting accordingly. I'm just checking the overall feel. So the first point here, and it should just be a general, it's just as you're riding and the stoke's high, just make sure your bike's back to where it was. If anything occurred during the ride, make sure you're gonna address those points when you get back home. All right, now that you've gotten back home, the ride was great, you kind of did that overall visual and hearing inspection, your bike's all gunked up, right? The trail conditions were muddy, you've seen all this stuff all over your bike like we're seeing here. You wanna get that bike clean. Now maybe not every time you're gonna get on and fully wash that bike, but what you're gonna do is clean it. If you are on that aspect where you need to fully wash your bike, we highly recommend the Muc-Off Ultimate Bicycle Care Kit. This thing it's pretty sick. It's got everything you need and it's bicycle friendly. Everything from expanding microcell sponges, all the great brushes and tools to get in there. It's got a great drivetrain cleaner, microfiber towel. What it's basically designed for is everything you need in a cool little toolbox to get that bike rolling real smooth, keep it clean, get all that gunk off. But a couple pro tips here I wanna offer. If you're using a pressure washer, don't get in there and blast all up inside of your hubs. Don't get in there and blast all inside of your rotors. Try to avoid any of those greased moving parts. Get in there by hand and be meticulous about those. Take your time with those. You don't want to blast all that grease in there and get water in those aspects. If you're riding an e-bike like this Orbea Rise, don't shoot all up into your motor and into the electronics parts or up here on your display screen. Be really calm, take your time, get the areas that need to do, and do most of it by hand, but use the bicycle-friendly products. That's the important thing because they're not gonna take away the parts of the bike that still need to stay there. Now that's basically what I have for washing your bike. We're gonna get into some more of the smaller aspects of cleaning and maintaining your bike post-ride now. So the next part about getting in there and just kind of cleaning everything post-ride is keeping those stanchions nice and wiped down. Again, I'm using that Muc-Off microfiber towel they provide. It's thick, it's nice, it really takes a lot of the aspects off here. And what I'm gonna do is just get in there and wipe everything down. You don't want debris to sit on those stanchions that are slowly gonna make their way through that seal. Now, I didn't really mention this before, but it's something I wanna bring up. Along with keeping those stanchions clean, making sure your rear shock, if you're running an air shock, is clean, is maintaining the way they feel, adjusting them, and understanding how they work. And I didn't really get into that in this video, and that is simply because of the fact that we have a whole series on suspension that we laid out everything you need to know, from adjusting your suspension to understanding air versus coil, everything you need to know. Be sure to check that out. We'll put the whole playlist there for you, but importantly here for your pre-ride and your post-ride, keep things going good. Make sure your adjustments are nice and flowing smoothly. What you're trying to do is get as much longevity out of these forks and out of this rear shock as you can. Again, here we have a coil on the Santa Cruz, so we're not gonna worry about getting in there and wiping that down, but we can still just make sure that no gunk is getting anywhere in there. But primarily just get in there and wipe down those stanchions. Get any type of debris that's on there out of the way, because we don't want that breaking through those seals. And those seals are really well made, don't get me wrong. But over time, if you keep letting debris build up, it's gonna make its way in there and you're gonna have to rebuild your fork a lot sooner than you'd like to have to do. So highly recommend after every ride, just wipe down your stanchions and get some of that debris off them. All right, now the next step here for your post-ride, and a super important one that we highly recommend here, and that's keeping that drivetrain clean, right? What we wanna do is make sure that our chain is nice, clean, there's no debris, and there's no gunk buildup, because the last thing you want is all that gunk to continually build up in there. It's gonna make your bike shift horribly, and it's just gonna start messing it up over time. What I like to use, what Preston likes to use, a lot of us here like to use, is this Park Tools chain cleaner. Now come in here real close, I'm gonna open this up, and we're gonna get in here and clean his chain, and I'm gonna show you exactly how it works and how awesome it is as a product, because you might say, well, I could just squirt it off and wipe it down. Of course you can. I'm not saying that's, that this is the only way. I'm just saying that this is really, really great when it comes to making your job easier and more efficient and giving you a better, clean drivetrain system. So come in here real close, show you how this thing works, and we'll get to it. All right, so we got out our Park Tools chain and drivetrain cleaning kit. The first step you're gonna wanna do here is fill it with the cleaner. And as you can see with this one, it's been well used. Like I said, you don't necessarily have to use one of these, but using one is gonna make your job a lot easier, right? So it says right here, it'll give you a fill line exactly where you wanna put that fluid in. There we go, right up to the fill line. Make sure you put your caps on. Last thing you want to do is bump over a bottle and spill it everywhere and be upset, right? So now what we're going to do is we're going to take this over to the drivetrain. I'm going to show you how to hook it up. And we're going to get this chain nice and clean. All right, now that we got our fluid in there, it's up to the fill line. What I'm going to want to do is set this on the chain here. And then what I want to do here is go ahead and hook this on. I want to line up my lines and just lock it in. Now, real quick and easy, all we're gonna do is just kind of work that through that chain. And as you can see, it's immediately just taking out all the gunk that's in that chain. We'll show you a close-up here in just a second, and what you'll be able to see is how dirty this water is now because of the amount of gunk that's gotten in here. Just gonna go ahead and unhook this thing and pop it off. And if you take a look there, what was once clean fluid is now full of all the debris and dirt that could have been gunking up your drivetrain. So how quick and easy was this system right here just to get on there and get your chain looking nice, shiny, and smooth. All right, so now that we got the chain all clean, one thing I would just recommend doing if you're riding a lot is just making sure your chain's not overly stretched out and you're losing that tension. So they make great tools for this. You'll have to know specifically with your bike and chain where that limit is. We know here with this chain that we don't want it to sit in the 0.5. So I'm gonna go ahead and just set this on the chain and set it down. And as you can see, it's not fitting in there, so we know we're still good on tension. It's not overly stretched. This isn't sitting in the next link up here. Everything is all good. So just a little quick tip to add there as you're going through the system, just make sure everything's flowing smooth, everything's holding tension, and you're getting good shifting. So now that we've got our drivetrain all nice and clean, we've made sure our chain is still holding that tension it needs to shift appropriately. Let's get into the next step of getting everything lubed down and flowing clean. All right, now that you saw how we got the drivetrain all cleaned up and it's all nice, what we recommend doing is getting a nice chain lube, right? I just grabbed these real quick to kind of show you. We got a wet lube and a dry lube, right? So your wet lubes primarily, it even shows you on the bottle, so if you're confused on which lube to use for your drivetrain, wet lube is gonna be kind of as it says, right? It's for your really wet conditions, you're moving into a little bit more damp of a condition. This is the kind of lube you're gonna wanna use on your drivetrain. For dry lube, again, it's for that dry, sandy, silty kind of condition, even into very slightly damp conditions. So make sure you choose your lube accordingly, and we highly recommend just make sure you're lubing your drivetrain after it's been cleaned. The last thing you want to do is throw a bunch of lube on there when there's already debris in that chain, and it kind of just keeps it in there. We don't want that to happen. So, and I would even say here, before you go out on your ride. A lot of these manufacturers of lubes are gonna tell you how long they need to sit on your chain before they get used. Lube your chain before you go out on your ride as well. It's not gonna hurt anything, right? So maybe lube it the night before if you know you're riding the next morning, whatever. Just keep that drivetrain moving smoothly. Make sure it's clean. That's gonna give you the biggest longevity on your bike. Ensuring that your bike is shifting out there on the trails, making sure it's going smoothly and all those things. So we're gonna get in here again in just a second. We're gonna get a close up and I'm gonna show you how the lube looks because I just think it looks great when a drivetrain's running smooth. It looks good, it's clean. So we'll get in here in just a second. All right, so we got our chain all nice and clean. We got the camera zoomed in. The next step is lubing up your drivetrain, getting that chain moving smoothly, you know, making sure you have the right lube. Based on the conditions here currently in Southern California, chances are most of the year we're going dry lube. So that's what I got here. Now, always read the directions of use because every brand is different, but what you wanna do is make sure you really shake your lube up, get it all, you know, mixed together and ready to go. Now on here for dry lube, it says to put on and wait 3 to 4 hours. So again, this might be the lube you put on the night before and then wait for the next ride, or even after your ride, after you've cleaned it, you put it on, you're good to go by the time you go ride again. So now that I've shooken it up, another good point here that I would recommend, find your master link. This is gonna give you a nice visual aid in order to figure out exactly when you're doing your rotations through and get that lube applied. So I'm just gonna go ahead, and before that, I just caught myself, the one thing you wanna do to save your floor is find a nice rag to lay down, because the last thing we wanna do is be leaking any lube all over the ground. So now what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna start pedaling through. It's a lot harder to do this stuff when there's a camera and you gotta position your body accordingly. So please forgive me if I'm dripping a little more than normal or anything like that. So now I've done one full rotation. I'm gonna continue going. I'm starting to see the lube there. Keep going. Preston's looking at me like, hurry up, don't hurt my bike. But here we go. So there's the second master lube just to be safe, and we're good to go. So what I would do then is that maybe I would take, as you can see here, I spilled a little bit. I'm gonna kind of just take a little bit of that off. I don't wanna leave big globs everywhere because again, that's just gonna pick up more debris out there. Just enough to get in there, get everything lubed up, flowing smoothly, and ready to enjoy your next ride. All right, so that's kind of the routine we kind of recommend for pre-ride and post-ride, maintenance and inspection here. And the primary thing we want to stress, go over your bike, learn your bike. As the more you ride it, the more you're gonna know the way it feels, the more you're gonna know the way it sounds. So just make sure that it's always on that point. Do the things that prevent the big things from happening, if that makes any sense, right? Listen to the sounds. If you go down on a crash, address that issue. Continue to make sure that your bike is rolling exactly the way you want it to do. These routines that I just kind of went over, they don't take that much time. They're pretty easy. If you make them kind of into just the regularity of your ride, it works well. Nothing is better than the peace of mind of knowing when you get on your bike, it's ready to roll. You don't have to tell your friends to hold up. You don't got to change the time of when you're meeting up for the ride because all of a sudden you realize you didn't do this after your ride or you didn't, inspect this properly, etc. Just be ready for that kind of stuff. It helps, and maybe you know something pre-ride or post-ride that I didn't address. Leave it on the comments below. Happy to address it. People probably love to hear your advice and your info. We're all a great community here around bikes, and we here at Jenson, our biggest goal is to keep you pedaling.